Welcome into Texans Today, everybody. I'm your host, Jeremy Chuggs, and a lot of top, storylines, a lot of rumors I got to break down on today's show, talk about the state of the Texans, back from my holiday break. Had a couple days without videos, but had to go home for the holidays, see my mom, see my brothers and sisters, and kind of go back to the H a little bit, hit up some of my favorite spots. But we're back. We're back to breaking down everything around this team, and I want to know from you your honest thoughts on the Texans right now. Be candid with me. My goal in this video, I'm going to try to respond to almost every single person who comments on today's video, because I honestly want to know, what are your thoughts around this team? How are you feeling about this organization going into the final week, going into the playoffs? Do you have zero hope? Do you have some sort of confidence about this team that they're going to be able to turn it around? What are your honest, candid thoughts around the Houston Texans? Go down in the comment section and let me know, because I'll be looking. On today's show, I'm going to be going over the latest news and rumors around the Houston Texans and breaking down some of the biggest question marks around this team, because there are plenty of question marks around this Texans team, because that Christmas Day game, it felt like a nightmare. It honestly felt like a nightmare. So I want to know these questions around the team. Should the Texans rest their starters? I mean, is there any point in even playing them in Week 18? Bobby Slowik, the Texans offensive coordinator, is he cooked? Is he done for next year? Are the Texans set on going on another direction? And could the Texans' loss to the Ravens possibly be a good thing? I know you're probably asking, Jeremy, how do you think that could even be close to a good thing for this team? Well, I might surprise you towards the end of today's video, my thoughts on that. But before we get going, I just want to say thank you to every single person who's hit that sub button already. We passed 23,000 subscribers. We're going on to 24. I want to hit 30 by the end of this football season. So if you haven't already, subscribe for daily videos around the Houston Texans. 100% free. It costs you nothing to sub. It helps me out a ton. A kid from Houston just trying to cover the Houston Texans. So help me out. Go down and hit that subscribe button if you want daily coverage around the Houston Texans. So let's get into our first topic on today's show. Should the Texans rest their starters up against the Tennessee Titans? Going to Toro heads, which means I'm really on the fence. I'm 50-50. If you ask me, do the Texans have anything to play for? No. Do you risk injury by playing your starters in this game? Yeah, of course you do. But after that game up against the Ravens on Christmas Day, where you scored 2 points, only coming on a safety from the Kamari Lassiter tackle in the end zone, do you feel comfortable with your guys sitting out a week and that being the last time that you saw the starters playing for the Houston Texans? My answer is no, and that's why I'm a little 50-50 on the Texans playing their starters this week, because I know in terms of playoff positioning, in terms of, strategery, does a win help the team? Does a loss hurt the team? No, not really. But in terms of momentum going into the playoffs, in terms of this team getting on the right track, I don't know if I'm okay with the Texans sitting out their starters going into Week 18 with how bad they played before, especially with new guys coming into the lineup like Deontay Johnson, the wide receiver the Texans claimed off of waivers. He's looking to possibly be a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, and I want more reps between him and CJ before the playoffs. I want to see this team get on the right track, and for them to do that, I think they have to play the starters in this last week, because if the last time we saw this team, the starters, is up against the Ravens on Christmas Day, I don't know how they're going to be able to just turn it on like that, whoever they play in the first round of the playoffs, which we'll get into the current AFC playoff picture in just a moment. But, if that's the last that I'm seeing of this Texans team, I'm nervous. I'm scared for what is in store for this Texans franchise, because if that's the level of competition, if that's the level of play that we're going to be getting out of this team, you might as well pack it up and be like, we're done for the season. It was nice while it lasted, because there is no shot in hell that this team is going to make any noise in the playoffs with how they played up against the Ravens on Christmas. No shot. It's slim to none, and the none is a 99.99% chance because that team that we saw on Christmas Day, no shot that they even come close to sniffing a win in the playoffs. And that's why, like I said, I'm on the fence about this. I'm giving it two arrowheads that they should sit the starters. I get it. You don't want to injure C.J. Stroud. You don't want to injure Nico Collins, Joe Mixon, some of your key guys, and even on the defensive side, Will Anderson, Derek Stingley, some of your top guys on the defensive side of the football, Danielle Hunter. You don't want any of those guys to get injured, but at the same time, you just coming off a loss. You also lost to the Titans earlier on in the season. If I'm calling the shots, I don't think the Texans have earned rest in Week 18. I think they need to play and prove that they're in it to win it, and they are trying to win a Super Bowl this season. I know that seems far-fetched. I know that sounds crazy. But anything can happen once you get into the playoffs, and all you need to do is go on a run. And how the Texans left it against the Baltimore Ravens, I don't see any way on God's green earth that they can start a run or make a run with how this team's playing. So in terms of them getting on the right track, them playing and getting ready for the playoffs, I think you have to play your starters in Week 18. That's just my opinion around this team. Next up, Bobby Slowik. Is it officially time for us to say hasta la vista to Bobby? I know he got head coaching offer or head coaching consideration last offseason, but is it time to say, yeah, this dude is not cutting it? I'll give you my answer in just a moment, but couldn't do today's show if it wasn't for our amazing sponsors over at Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Get started today and get in on the action with your friends and become part of the Prize Picks community. Win real money this football season. They also have basketball, hockey, MMA, all on Prize Picks. And during the month of December, you can win up to 1,000 times your money over on Prize Picks. And what they're calling Picksmas during the month of December. Only a couple more days left. They're giving away 2 free picks and over $30 million in rewards and prizes over at Prize Picks. So get started today. Download the Prize Picks app. Use code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. So get started today with our friends over at Prize Picks. Run your game. Bobby Slowik. Is he done in Houston? I wanted to give this 4, but just pending a playoff run, which I'm still holding out my hopes. I want this team to do something in the playoffs. I got to give it 3. I got to give it 3 Toro heads, and that I think it's likely that after this season, Bobby Slowik and the Texans will part ways. It's just been downhill this season. C.J. Stroud has regressed. That is a fact that we are all going to... Now, has C.J. Stroud, showed me enough to say I'm out on him? Not at all. I'm 100% with C.J. Stroud being the franchise, being the guy who we put our hat on, who we, really trust to be the cornerstone of this franchise. I still believe that's C.J. Stroud. But what Bobby Slowik has done to this offense has just been criminal. Him and the offensive line coach need to leave this offseason. The run game, even though statistically might be a little bit better than last season, the run blocking's not there. If you didn't have Joe Mixon, if you had a worse back, I think this would be by far the worst running team in the NFL. It might be a historically bad running team with how bad they have blocked up front in the run game. The passing game, non-creative. And the creative plays the Texans do run, they never seem to work out. How many times have you seen a trick play that the Texans have run this year actually do really well for this team? I can barely think of any trick plays, any trickery, any, cool formations the Texans have done this season that I've been like, you know what? We really outsmarted the other team, and that was a great play. It's a lot of individual efforts, but around this team, the last great play that I saw from the Houston Texans where I was like, wow, that was a spectacular design play, perfectly executed, that I can think of off the top of my head is the win up against the Bills and that deep bomb to Nico Collins. I mean, on offense, it has been a struggle this entire season, and it shouldn't be like that. When you have a C.J. Stroud, a promising young quarterback, when you have weapons, I know they got injured, but with Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Stephon Diggs, Dalton Schultz, Joe Mixon on this team, it shouldn't be like that. So I don't know if all the blame deserves to be on Bobby Slowik, but a lot of it sure does. And DeMeco needs to figure it out. He needs to figure out who the next OC is going to be, whether that's in-house Gerard Johnson or he needs to go out and hire somebody else. But this isn't going to cut it going into next year. And if you roll out Bobby Slowik next season, I'm going to say it. I think CJ Stroud might regress even more, and we might get into a point where it comes contract negotiating, and we're like, do we need to draft another quarterback? Because Bobby Slowik, what he's done to CJ Stroud, what he's done to this offense this year, it's apprehensible. And I don't think he deserves to come back next season for the Houston Texans. I want to hear from you. Do you think Bobby Slowik will be the OC in 2025? What are your thoughts? Let me know down in the comment section. Do you think Bobby Slowik will be back in 2025? Give me a yes, give me a no. Let me know your thoughts as we get into the final talking point on today's show. The Texans lost. Was it a good thing for the Texans to lose up against the Baltimore Ravens? Well, slightly yes. If you watched on Christmas Day, you might have noticed there was another game going on. And that was the Steelers up against the Kansas City Chiefs. And the Steelers did not look good in that game whatsoever. The Steelers looked bad in that game. The Texans actually played the Chiefs much better, in my opinion, than the Pittsburgh Steelers did. And with the loss from the Texans, a silver lining is that if you beat the Ravens, there was a chance that you could have had to face them once again in the wild card round of the playoffs. The Steelers could have, jumped the Ravens for the AFC North Championship, and you could have faced the Ravens again in 2 weeks. And I think the Texans match up actually way better to the Steelers than they do to the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously, if you watch the Christmas Day game, you'd probably be saying, duh, Jeremy. Of course they don't match up against the Ravens. Look at what happened. But with everything going down, with how the Texans lost, obviously that's not a good thing. You don't want the Texans to absolutely crap the bed. But if there is a silver lining, I think it's this. One, you might have a more favorable matchup in the playoffs up against the Pittsburgh Steelers rather than the Baltimore Ravens. And two, maybe this is finally the wake-up call that this team needs. If it wasn't the losses before, if it wasn't the loss to the Tennessee Titans, if it wasn't how this offense played up against the Jets on Halloween, maybe finally this is the spark that the team needs. We've had countless team meetings, player-only meetings for this team. We've had so much stuff around this team where you're like, maybe they're turning the card. Maybe this is the point where the Texans are going to show the entire AFC that they're contenders, or show everybody that, this team isn't, a fraud. And that hasn't happened yet. That simply hasn't happened. And maybe this is the wake-up call that this team needed. Maybe the Texans need to play the starters in Week 18 and need to prove something, and need to prove something to this fan base. Because I promise you this, with how good the Texans I thought were going to be this year, the attendance at NRG has actually been pretty sad, in my opinion, with Texans fans showing up on time, Texans fans being there, getting rowdy. And how do I blame them whenever this is the result for home games, when they play this bad during home games? You want the city to show out? You want the city to get loud and get proud? Show us. Show us how much this means to you. Show us on the field how good we have it. How this is a show that you must come and watch every single week, the Houston Texans. Because honestly, if I bought tickets to that Texans-Ravens Christmas Day game, I don't even think I would have gotten my money's worth from the halftime show from Beyonce. The game was that bad. So if you want this city, this fan base to take you seriously, the whole NFL to take you seriously, step up. Actually do something. And show us that you deserve to be in the playoffs. Show us that you are the AFC South Champions. And show us that we should have some glimmer of hope of the Texans winning in the playoffs.